Hey, good morning, everybody. What a wonderful way to start with that music, with all of our shining stars of Minnesota's technology community coming together this morning. My name is Jeff Tollefson, and I have the privilege and pleasure of serving as a president of the Minnesota Technology Association. And for those that don't know about our organization, we're a coalition of approximately 250 members united in a mission of building a stronger, more vibrant and inclusive tech ecosystem in Minnesota. And we fill our mission by enabling a lot of the partnerships, the connections and public policies that can allow our tech community to thrive. And many times it's just events like this, a CIO gathering where we can come together to connect, to learn from each other and grow in our abilities to elevate our collective work. So happy that you've chosen to join us this morning, and it should be a great day. First, a couple of housekeeping elements. Please feel free to use the chat for your insights, comments, but questions will be really at the breakout session at the end. So hold your questions until then, and use your speaker view when appropriate, as opposed to gallery. But you'll continue to keep you apprised of things we'll be doing as we go. But today's event couldn't happen without our generous sponsors. And we have two with us today. Our presenting sponsor, Snowflake, and event sponsor, Perficient. And so to kick things off, it's my pleasure to introduce Ross Selden of Snowflake.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, my name's Ross Selden with Snowflake. I'm one of 25 Snowflakes here. I'm supporting the Twin Cities market. Jeff, I can remember about a year and a half ago, us first talking about this when I joined Snowflake, and now here we are, not only a member, but a sponsor for probably one of the most elite events for MnTech. So really appreciate that. I want to say how grateful we are for the opportunity to sponsor this and be among a group of amazing thought leaders. I can't wait to hear a little bit more about what they're thinking, but especially during kind of these trying and uncertain times. You can slip to the next slide. I'll just talk just high level over a little bit about how Snowflake is helping organizations today. So during trying and uncertain times, the first thing we do is we look towards information or data to help kind of steer or drive decisions, and enter the Snowflake Data Cloud. So we created a data cloud, which is a network of thousands of organizations as data consumers and providers that are allowing organizations to easily discover and share live data sets with customers, business partners, and internally. And so much that we did so back in April, where we made our data marketplace. We have a COVID-19 data set that's an unpivoted, daily updated incident and mortality rate data set that organizations were using to enrich their view of their business and their customers to try to better understand how this was going to impact their organization. Snowflake's helped organizations unify, integrate, and analyze data that's historically been siloed into other areas. And so really accelerating the capability to introduce things like predictive analytics, automated intelligence, and machine learning to help really drive organizations to succeed in what it is their core business is, which is understanding their customers, their partners, and their industry. Other things that Snowflake's allowed organizations to do is really create robust virtual applications from an analytics perspective, as well as lowering overall operational costs. So we're really excited about the opportunity to hear a little bit more about, for the C-level perspective, on how important data has been and how that's been a game changer for them. And we really understand that democratizing data and understanding ways to create new revenue streams with the data that you currently own in the marketplace is really going to be a competitive differentiator for organizations moving forward. So thanks again for that, and looking forward to the afternoon. Thanks, Jeff.
No, thank you, Ross, and thank you to the whole Snowflake team. It's now my pleasure to introduce somebody that arguably doesn't need any introduction in Minnesota's technology community, and that's Dee Thibodeau, founder and CEO of Charter Solutions. Dee has been a board member at MnTech for the past 20 years, and created and leads our CIO forums, the CIO panels. She is the consummate connector of people in our technology community, which is why it brings me great pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Dee Thibodeau.
Thanks so much, Jeff. This is always an exciting event. We look forward to it because we want to know what exciting things are going to be happening in 2021, and never more so than this year when 2020 has been a challenge. We have seven fantastic people that are going to be speaking to you today. We've got Chris Ross, the CIO of Mayo Clinic. We've got Casey Gordon, the CIO of the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University. Teddy Beckel, who is the SVP and CTO of Land O'Lakes. Sean Swearingen, the Chief Innovation Officer of Faegre Drinker. Dan Abdul, the SVP and CTO of Medica. Tony Peleska, the VP of IT and Head of Digital Transformation, Kraus-Anderson Companies, and Laura Groshen, who's the VP and CIO of Cardiovascular Business and Medtronic Global Functions. So you will find out all of the opportunities and challenges of 2021 from this great group. The plan of the program is that each one is going to speak about 7 minutes. Hold your questions till later, and then there will be a breakout session in which you will be able to answer all of your questions. The first person that is going to be speaking is Chris Ross, and I'd like to introduce Chris. Chris is the Chief Information Officer at Mayo Clinic. He's responsible for information technology and medical technology. Chris led one of the nation's largest electronic health record convergence programs and leads major innovation programs at Mayo. He's on the board of HIMSS. He serves on the boards of CaringBridge and Zipnosis and is in advisory roles at several other national organizations. A University of Minnesota alum, Chris earned his MBA at Yale. A fun fact, because I always get a fun fact for everybody, is that Chris is the lover of wooden boats of all kinds, and he owns a 36-foot wooden cruiser built in Toronto in 1948. Let's welcome Chris. I know he's coming on.
Yeah, rookie move. Got to get the mute off in the morning. Dee, thanks for that nice introduction. And I really appreciate having a chance to be here with this fantastic panel today. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about today as we think about, what's ahead is what were the things that happened in 2020. So in early January, I was talking with a dear friend at Mayo Clinic who's a radiologist, and all she does all day is diagnose lung disease. And I asked, is this COVID thing going to be a big deal? And she said, it is. We had dodged MERS, we had dodged SARS, and this was really troubling. In early February, the disease came to the US, and it first appeared in Washington State. I have a daughter who lives in Seattle, so naturally I was pretty concerned about that. About a week later, I serve as the chair of the board of this organization, HIMSS, which amongst other things holds a big conference for about 45,000 people. And that was scheduled for the second week of March. And I texted the CEO and said, do you think we ought to think about contingency planning in case we need to reduce the size of the conference? On March 5th, we canceled that conference, and it was somewhat shocking at the time. Events were just beginning to be canceled and flights were beginning to be restricted. And then COVID hit New England. I want to read a couple of notes from a friend of mine who's a CIO at a major New York hospital group. On March 13th, New York State had a total of 93 cases, but he emailed a group of our peers and said, it's getting very real very quickly. My quick advice is bolster your organization's ability to work from home. He talked about telemedicine. He talked about iPads for patients in their rooms, laptops for work at home. On March 17th, New York was up to 742 cases. He emailed an update from New York. All elective cases have been canceled. We have more than 100 COVID positive patients in-house. We have iPads at the bedside of all positive patients for communications. 1% of our practice visits were telemedicine. Now we're up to 12% and climbing. On the 25th, New York had 6,677 cases and 151 deaths, and he reported an incredibly dire condition. More than 900 patients inpatient for COVID, that the patients who come in are very sick and decompensate quickly and so on. So we began to see across the country a really challenging condition. This came on within 90 days from kind of first awareness to the point that it was, a pandemic across the East Coast. So what happened at Mayo? So our outpatient visits, our telemedicine visits were about 3% of total visits. They went to 85% in about 3 weeks. Our target now is about 15 to 20%. If you had said at the beginning of the year that we would quintuple our amount of video visits, I would have thought that was outrageously aggressive. We've got about 30,000 people working from home, 20,000 of whom were not equipped for telework on March 1st. We got them home in about 10 days. We went through some really tough times. We furloughed staff, cut benefits, but then when we were able to begin to offer elective procedures again, the practice recovered. We were able to restore pay and benefits, and Mayo's going to have a solid year this year on the strength of our physicians who literally worked nights and weekends to provide critical care that they were not able to provide in March, April, and early May. So, what went well and what didn't go well? What went well from a situational awareness standpoint, when all non-urgent care stopped at Mayo Clinic, both because of statewide orders and because of our own judgment, we immediately understood that we had both a public health crisis and a financial crisis, and we took extreme action immediately, unprecedented action in order to make sure that we could shore up and sustain Mayo through what looked like was going to be a difficult time. As an industry as a whole, we mobilized as if we were going to war. There has been remarkable progress. This is a little bit of a crude way to measure it, but in March, at our peak across the US, we had about 35,000 cases of COVID per day and about 2,500 deaths. So that's a mortality rate of about 7%. Right now, we have about 220,000 cases per day and about 2,800 deaths. Still unbelievably tragic, but the mortality rate has declined to about 1.3% from 7% in March. Now, we don't know exactly why that mortality rate was reduced, but we know that it has to do with things like learning best practices and applying them quickly, sharing data between organizations on best practices, application of things like retroviral drugs and monoclonal antibody therapies, other kinds of things that help avoid hospitalizations. And Mayo discovered some things about itself. We discovered that we were more resilient and more agile than maybe we thought we would be. We're a big institution, $13 billion across multiple states, UK and Abu Dhabi. And it wasn't clear whether we were going to be able to respond in the ways we did. We did. We abandoned some old ways, and we were able to accelerate towards our 2030 goals at rapid speed. Frankly, digital transformation was thrust upon us, and I'll bet that'll be a theme that we might hear from some of the other CIOs. What drove digital transformation in 2020 for us was not our chief digital officer or our chief executive officer, it was COVID. So what didn't go so well? Well, overall, our public health response has not been good in the US. There's uncertainty and fog of war. We probably closed down some things we didn't need to, and we didn't shut down some things that we should. But we didn't learn and we didn't take strong action. So amongst countries with more than 5 million population, the US is the 7th worst with about 875 deaths per million. You compare that to places like South Korea that was originally a hotspot, they had about 11 deaths per million. Japan is at 18, New Zealand 5, Singapore 5, and so on. So when we compare ourselves against the best in the world, we don't look so good. At Mayo, our research efforts were not as perfect as we hoped. The digital divide became clear. Some of our patients and our staff were not able to connect effectively, and we're still struggling to get collaboration tools. But beyond that, though, I would say I'm optimistic. We know that data made a difference. We don't know yet exactly how people will feel about healthcare when this is all over. Will people accept vaccines, or will the anti-vax movement be large? What will happen with virtual care and so on? But clearly, adversity causes innovation, causes value, and we will have better public health infrastructure when we come out of this. So, Dee, I'm optimistic, but it sure has been a once-in-a-lifetime year at Mayo and most other places.
Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate it. And nothing is more critical right now than finding out about what we should be doing with COVID. And the innovation that you stated is really is challenging and fantastic. So thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate it. Our next panelist is Casey Gordon. Casey is the Chief Information Officer at the College of St. Benedict, St. John's University. She has a lifelong passion for exploring topics that bring together learning and technology, as well as leadership and collaboration. Dr. Gordon holds a PhD in educational leadership and higher education from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and earned her master's at the University of Minnesota Duluth. And her fun fact, I always like to give a fun fact because you get to know the people a little bit better. Casey has a love for travel her entire life, both nationally and internationally. And last year she opened a travel agency called Beaches and Dreams, and she's had like 6 people working for her. I am waiting for her travel agency to open up because I'm waiting for travel as well. So let's welcome Casey.
Thank you, Dee. I think everyone's anxious to travel again. Myself, certainly, I love to cruise, so I'm looking forward to getting back out on the water at some point in the future. Well, I'm going to talk with you a little bit about what's been happening with higher education. So I work at the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University in central Minnesota. I've been there for 5 years, going on my 6th year now. And what's unique about our schools is we are actually a college for men and a college for women, 2 completely separate organizations, but IT is joint over both. And so we partner together. Our schools have a collaboration, and they're very community focused and very residential and in-person focused. So when you talk about disruption in higher education, we've seen for years the disruption that online education has caused. And again, I talk about disruption in a positive way, right? It is changing the face of learning, both in elementary schools all the way up, but of course in the higher education realm. Now, that has a huge impact to schools that are primarily in residence. Well, all of that was really exacerbated by the pandemic, right? When we were forced to say, even though we value residential in-person experiences, we have to do more with online than we've been doing before. To give you a little bit of an idea about the state of higher education, I think it's important to go back before the pandemic. We were already in a period of disruption. There was a huge increase in competition for schools. And of course, this was caused by technology, the movement of people, and just this prolific era of more and more people looking for higher education options and more higher education options being available. So the growth of for-profit schools, so many factors. And one of the things that we're all tracking is something that we refer to it not so lovingly as the enrollment cliff. If you haven't heard about this, this is actually going to occur in 2026. It is based off of the fact that there was a recession in 2008 and people stopped having babies at the same rate. So for many, many years, we have known that in 2026, that will be the first year where in the United States, in most areas, there's going to be less people graduating from high school and wanting to come to college than ever before. In Minnesota, that actually we will see by 2026, that year we'll have between a 7.5% and a 15% drop in the number of graduates. Over half of the states in the United States have more than a 15% drop of students who are graduating from high school, excuse me. So what that means is that we have this tight market already. We're very competitive and everyone's trying to hit enrollment. And in a few years, it's only going to get tighter. Now, the interesting thing that the pandemic has really exacerbated about all of that is it has really increased this competition because now students can go anywhere, and they're going and attending remotely because we're all remote. And it has also increased competition because we're all upping our game technologically. So for example, for our school, we actually over the course of the summer, in an effort to try to create this kind of an experience where students may be in the classroom or they may not be in the classroom, we took a period of about 6 weeks and we outfitted 108 classrooms with what we call high flex technology. And what this enables is anyone in the room, the professor or the students, can be either remote or in person at any time. So our goal was that if someone gets quarantined, they could the very next day call into that class remotely over Zoom. There's cameras and microphones in the classroom. All of the students can call in from their laptops. Faculty can call in from their laptops. So this fall, we put that into effect. And there was a little bit of a learning curve with many of the faculty and some of the students, but overall it went really well. In some classrooms, we had no faculty member there if they were quarantined or if they were a high risk category and they were at home. It was very flexible. In other classrooms, we had students coming in and going out as they quarantined or as they were isolating, different things like that. But that's all in person and more of that kind of community-based technology. The other component that's been really important has been, what are we offering online? What are the virtual technologies that people can take advantage of? And when I say that, I'm talking about not just virtual desktops, where they're logging in and using different types of software, but really also that other component like chemistry and biology, and how are people allowed to do 3D modeling and experimentation. And that's some of the differentiators for what does an online experience look like when it's good, and what does it look like when it's great. A good online experience gives you all the resources that you might have, like your computer and access to software. A great online experience is when you really can get and take advantage of some of those hands-on types of experiences, but in a virtual environment. And that's what many of our schools are being forced in a good way, right? I mean, one of the positives out of the pandemic is we were forced into this very quickly, but it's a good thing for students. We should have been doing much of this anyway, because even if students aren't remote, they still need access to a lot of this from home or from their dorm rooms as they study for their courses. So it really has kind of pushed us forward in that realm. There's a lot of opportunity here. Some of what I talked about is a little dire with that cliff out there looming, but there's so much opportunity. If we don't act, what's going to happen is some schools are going to close. There's not enough students to keep us busy, right? If you focus on the traditional learner. But if we adapt, there is a ton of opportunity. And in particular, I'll call out one opportunity that we've focused on, and that is around AI and data. So when you look forward, Gartner predicts that there's going to be World Economic Forum. There's a lot of places that predict that AI is going to automate some people out of work, but AI is also going to create jobs. And everyone argues about the numbers, but those 2 points they agree on. There's going to be some work that is automated and some work that is new. Well, that creates a new form of learner, right? So yes, while we know our traditional students might be declining, there's going to be this tremendous growth over here. And so working with programs that teach people about how to use AI, students are taking classes in how to work with AI, how to work with the data that AI creates. Those things are going to be incredibly important. So focusing on shifting to that non-traditional learner will be really clear. So in terms of that, there's a ton of opportunities around data, just like one of our sponsors, Snowflake, said. So I will leave it with that, and we'll see you in the breakout rooms.
Thank you so much, Casey. I did not realize that 2026. That is a fascinating fact. And I was thinking, after 2020, is 2038 going to be even more of a challenge? But very interesting and very innovative what you're doing at your college. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Teddy Beckel. Teddy is the Senior VP and Chief Technology Officer at Land O'Lakes. He uses his passion for researching, developing, and implementing innovative technology solutions to help retailers and farmers produce more nutritious food while using fewer resources and new and sustainable ways. Teddy earned his MBA at Indiana University and chairs the Minnesota Broadband Task Force, as well as a federal task force on precision agriculture connectivity and adoption. And Teddy's fun fact is he's had kids in his home for 43 years, and I definitely want to hear that story because I can't quite imagine how that all happened. Welcome, Teddy.
Good morning, Dee. Thank you. I figured I had to qualify that one. So I have 3 kids. One is the oldest 25, the youngest is 11 months old. So when you do the math of like how long have they been in our household, at least to the age of 18, and you kind of take that spread into account, it actually adds up to 43 years. So it's pretty crazy. I don't know how we're going to work through that. We're still working through it, but it's been fun. It keeps us young and old at the same time. It's a strange feeling. Well, good morning, everyone. Glad to be here. The topic I wanted to cover today was around digital transformation. And I have a few slides to kind of illustrate that a little bit. But just to get you grounded a little bit, first of all, who's Land O'Lakes? I'm sure most of you know Land O'Lakes for the butter, and we love you for it. Keep buying it, keep baking, keep cooking. We absolutely are thrilled about that. But Land O'Lakes is a farmer-owned cooperative. And there's 4 major business units within it. One is the crop inputs business, where we buy seed and crop protection from large manufacturers and sell it to ag retailers in the countryside. This is our largest business, by the way. Purina is our animal nutrition, not dog and cat, but every other animal you could think of. We make the formulation and feed them. Land O'Lakes, the dairy business, and then Truterra is our sustainability platform. This is kind of a corporate way to look at this, but if you go to the next slide, I can show you a little bit more about how our businesses are connected. So we sell seed, we put it into the ground along with our retailers and farmers. We grow that seed, it turns into corn silage and alfalfa, that feed goes to animals, and that animals could be cows. And then from the cows, we get the milk, and from the milk, you get the butter and cheese, and that's what you consume at your household. So that's Land O'Lakes in the food supply chain, and we're sort of connected end to end. But like I mentioned earlier, our largest business unit is in the crop input side, the one on the left-hand side, right? And so when you look at that, we touch about 300,000 domestic producers in the United States, 10,000 rural communities, and almost in one shape or form, half of the harvested acres in the United States. Why do I bring this up? How we've been successful over the last 99 years is the research that we put into place into our organization. So we have about 115 plots where we plant different seed varieties. We do different crop protection applications. We have our labs where we do a lot of the testing, and we look at micronutrients, how do they impact growth of crops and all those types of things, and lots of technology that goes into this. And all these insights was something that what we call a sales agronomist or an agronomist, somebody who knew a lot about agronomy, would go and talk to a farmer about what's the best seed to place onto your field, what kind of applications do you put on it, what kind of practices should you follow, et cetera, right? And we've been very successful with that. Well, in the last 3 years, or 5 years, we've had to shift and start to use digital, right? And I'll talk about digital transformation. I'll show you the digital, but I'll talk about how difficult the transformation side of it is, right? So if we go to the next slide, here are some of the tools that we apply today. So instead of just showing up and having your tribal knowledge and some of the information we gave you about all these seeds and crop protection applications, we've actually put tools in the hands of these folks and said, look, you can have a tool where you can use remote sensing and GIS to be able to look at a field and look at performance over time. And the heat chart shows you high performing areas, low performing areas. These seed insights that we get from these plots are all in this tool with bar charts and all that. So you can use that for discussion. In season, when the crop is growing, you can go out and see which area of the field is most stressed. So you can see on that second diagram where it's a little bit red, in that spot, go there, take a sample, send that sample to the lab, and we'll give you the nutritional profile of nitrogen, potassium, and also like growing degree days and a bunch of other things that they really have this richer discussion with the farmer and goes beyond sort of the art of it and goes more into the science on how to grow a good crop, right? But we even pushed it one more further. And if we go to the last slide, we also got into more sustainability practices. So what I'll show you here is look at the 2 pictures on the page there, and we give you a score from 0 to 100 about how sustainable you are. And the one on the left is more of a conventional way to manage a field. The one on the right-hand side is more of a sustainable practice with cover crops, and we won't go into the details of that. But what you can see is you can apply the same practices, and ultimately from a profitability perspective, you end up almost in the same spot as a farmer. So that's the good story, that you can apply sustainability practices, you're not losing money. However, when you look at down into the stewardship metrics, now this is where things get interesting. Soil erosion is a big deal, the quality of the soil, and emissions most of all, right? Carbon into the atmosphere. You can see with the conventional practice that you're a carbon emitter in this case, whereas when you're applying the practice that we give you, you can actually be a carbon sequester. So you can actually take away carbon from the environment. So these are great tools, right? So exciting. And if people, like, hey, you should use this, and you can have some great conversations. You can actually transform farmers from being anti-climate change to actually becoming environmentalists and promoters of climate variability and what they can do to improve that situation. What we found is this is very difficult, by the way, because you have folks that really, you can put all the tools in their hands, but they're comfortable. I had a gentleman one time tell me, I can sell a bag of seed that's really expensive and give it to a farmer. The seed never comes out of the ground. I can talk my way out of that. I put this in on an iPad and try to show them this data, and the thing spins and doesn't do anything. I pack up and go home, and I'm so embarrassed, and I can never set foot back onto that farm. So, although we developed all this interesting technology, one of the things we realized is that we had to put intentional efforts to be able to help a lot of our, not only the farmers, but also the retailers that work with them and our own staff to be able to take a look and how can we make these things more accessible? How do we mold it in with what they do today and really get it to a spot where they can be comfortable leveraging the technology? So this is a long journey. You can develop all the digital you want, but the transformation is really hard. And the pandemic has helped, right? So meaning like the fact that now we couldn't go face to face and maybe we had to look at a screen, and it was much easier to look at a screen and have this discussion versus more of the kind of the traditional way of doing it. But still, we got long ways to go. And hopefully you got something out of this, Dee, and I'm happy to have more conversation during the breakouts.
Thank you so much, Teddy. As I'm driving around Minnesota, looking at the fields, I am really going to respect so much more of what they all are going through and all the information that they're getting. The one thing Teddy didn't mention that was in the chat room was you also do facial recognition on cows, right?
Yeah, that's another part of the business. And we do actually use that to be able to see how the cows are performing and see if they're in, have some health issues or, the feeding ratios are not right. And based on that, we can adjust some of the things that happen in the barn.
That is unbelievable. Well, thank you so much, Teddy. Really appreciate it. Our next speaker is Sean Swearingen. Sean is the Chief Innovation Officer of the law firm of Faegre, Drinker, Biddle, and Reith. Her innovation team consists of professionals in data science and analytics, knowledge management, client design services, legal process improvement, and legal project management. Sean holds a Master's of Library and Information Science, is a certified knowledge manager, and is certified in the Foundation, and a white belt in Legal Lean Six Sigma, which I didn't even realize that they had a special area. Sean's fun fact is she completed the Twin Cities Marathon after getting a stress fracture on mile 17, and she finished anyway, running the entire way. You are a great one, Sean. Welcome. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Dee, and hi, everyone. Today, I'll talk about two challenges and two opportunities that I've been thinking a lot about for 2021 and beyond for our law firm, though they're generally really applicable to many industries. So first up are the challenges, starting with culture. So it's been a really long time since many of us have been in offices, heard laughter in halls, giving high fives for jobs well done. I think about what Teddy just said about the facial recognition. Boy, it would be great to, have a viewpoint into people and see how they're doing each day. These are just things that are really tough to replicate in the current state that we're in. And really going into 2021, I think we have a really big job ahead of us. As we start to return to our offices, or those of you who maybe already have, it's really tricky because it's going to look and feel different, right? We're going to come back and many teams are going to become hybrid or in person with remote colleagues. So it's going to be this weird world that we live in. And coming up with strategies and tools that really keep your culture intact and top of mind, no matter where one is, will be key. These are really things we should have been focusing on all along. But everyone being remote really highlighted the need and what our historically remote workers have probably been experiencing all along, a little bit of being left out potentially. So for newer future employees, if you haven't already put a plan in place, do it. When one is new and remote, it is so challenging to understand and see a culture in action, and even more difficult to create relationships. And once we start returning, I fear that excitement of being back in an office has the risk of isolating our remote colleagues even more. So we'll need to really take some intentional steps to ensure that they're included, which leads to collaboration, the second challenge. And you all might be thinking, I'm crazy. All we do is collaborate. I'm on Zoom all day. So yeah, we do have a myriad of ways of collaborating. We've got Slack and Jabber and Teams. And that said, I feel like we're now at a point where we need to focus on and really consider how we collaborate. Are we using the right tool? And what level of engagement is necessary for each encounter? Does it have to be all video all the time? So if you think, when's the last time you picked up a phone to call somebody, a colleague or a client, just out of the blue, no appointment, no video, no agenda, just to call and say, hey, and really check in on those folks. Many people are really craving those informal office interactions that stimulate creativity, encourage collaboration, and creating that office-like experience for your company is really a goal that one should focus on. So, think about hosting something like office hours where colleagues can drop by virtually, or like Casey mentioned, I loved that wall that she described. Do you have a large monitor and a camera placed in a busy location in your office where remote people can drop by and visit virtually on screen with their in-office colleagues? So I thought that was a really interesting idea that I'd love to give a try to. So for both of those challenges, addressing them can be incremental. It does not have to be big monumental things, but being planful and purposeful is really key and something that should be focused on. So now for opportunities, next slide, please. All right, first is accelerating adoption. So overall, we've heard most technologists, innovators that I've spoken to have said they really pivoted nicely to a remote environment last spring. We heard Chris talk about it. We heard Casey talk about it. Hopefully that rings true with most of you as well, and that your leadership really saw your creativity and agile planning and execution that made it happen. So here's what I say. I say strike while the iron is hot. So you've built an abundance of trust in your organization. They just saw you perform what many felt were miracles. And you might find that your organization is much more willing to adopt existing technology or take chances on new technology. Whatever you do, don't go back to the way it was. If things go back to business as usual, continue to really try to push the envelope and offer creative solutions. Another big opportunity is the use of data science and analytics to drive strategy, something we're really focusing on. So our technology teams are sitting atop mounds of data that we're curating for our organization, whether it's financials, talent information, customer data. Work with your business partners internally and use that data to gain insight and drive performance. So if you don't already know what your business strategy and goals are at your company, make sure you really understand those. So you can start thinking creatively about that data that you hold and that you can shed light on and drive the goals going forward. So just an example, let's say it is finding and retaining top talent. Have you looked at your data, or do you need to collect some? So you can see patterns, trends. For retention, can you predict upcoming departures? And could you get ahead of it, or better yet, proactively avert those? Are there characteristics you can glean from that behavior of a person or a group that are thinking about leaving your organization? Do you understand their social networks? Really important. Like when someone leaves, do you know who else isn't far behind? These are all things that data could really highlight, and that's just one small example. The ideas and approaches are endless. So really focus on what your organization cares about and make an impact. So that is those are my thoughts for the day. Back over to Dee.
Thank you so much, Sean. I really liked your idea of a phone call. I've been doing that myself lately because sometimes it's just easy to pick up the phone and do that. I loved your data analytics as well, because I do think that even your idea of checking social media to see if other people might be interested in leaving was a key idea that we might be able to use as well. So thank you so much, Sean. I appreciate it. Our next speaker is Dan Abdul. Dan is the Senior VP and Chief Technology Officer for Medica Health Plans. He inspires growth and transformation with visionaries, leadership, and digital products and technology delivery. Dan also sits on several boards, including Ecumen, a national provider of long-term care and mental health connect, which works to open doors for those living with mental illness. Dan's fun fact is, for relaxation, he does long-distance target shooting out to 1,500 yards. So I am going to make sure when I'm around Dan that I am way beyond that 1,500 yards. Let's welcome Dan.
Hello, Dee. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me today. It's interesting following a great group of speakers. What I want to do first is sort of set the context as I was invited to talk about the 2021 challenges and opportunities that we see ahead. I looked across our industry and, quite frankly, broadly across all industries, and there are certain trends that, I see, and I'm sure everyone can sees these as well. In our industry, I see healthcare costs continuing to go up, so there isn't much change there. But there's also an increased rate of complexity in the healthcare system, and by that I mean not just dealing with chronic conditions, but polychronic conditions. And then you take into account the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic that has just shown, put a greater demand on our systems to manage public health, which brings a different set of muscles that we need to exercise. So those are sort of three elements when I look specifically at the healthcare industry and what those the challenges it brings. But as you look at the just the amount of work and how we get work done, we have increasing demands. I'm sure we all experience this. It feels like the work just keeps coming at us. But we're also experiencing the fragility of our workforce, right? Everything from people having to be home to quarantine. I don't know about all of you, but I felt like we just lost an overwhelming number of people this year. So people having to be out for that and just having to deal with those challenges. But then you also take things to the next level and you see that, in the midst of all of this social unrest, we have interesting data that shows us the dynamics of how our population is changing over the next few years, right? With the Caucasian race targeted in 2044 to no longer be the majority race. So how are we as a society preparing for this, right? How are we going to be able to continue to source talent in what continues to be a very competitive talent pool? So these thoughts drove out the three areas that I'm going to be talking about. And the first one being, as we look at the rising cost, complexity, and public health areas, what can real-time analytics bring to bear? In today's world, we've made tons of advances when it comes to ML, AI, deep learning. Unfortunately, the challenge is that a lot of that works on a batch use case. So by that, I mean, if you look at your process flow to do machine learning, you take the data traditionally offline and you have to crunch through a massive amount of data, right, which creates challenges. So the opportunity is really, how do we implement, start to create patterns and designs that support real-time use cases, right? So if we think about healthcare, you have maybe about 15 minutes with your doctor, and we need to be able to provide insights, usable insights that will help that care. Or you're in the emergency room, right, and you have data that around your health from a whole vast array of sources, other providers, other payers that we have to bring together, right? I would pose that a big challenge for us to move forward is, let's stop thinking about, oh, look at what my bot can do or what my model can do, but how can we really inject this into the healthcare ecosystem to work? It will find that a lot of these will be on a real-time basis, right? So as a use case, I point out that if you think about the way you can really provide insights to an individual seeking care, it's really about learning not just from that individual's past care history, but the population's care history, and say, and help drive decisions that are made in the future. COVID has been a good example where we're constantly learning new therapeutics. How are we injecting that back into the care system, right? So these are great use cases, and I think they'll continue to be a challenge. If we move on now, if we go to the next slide, next item that I call out is tied to the fact that we know that demand on our organizations continue to increase, our departments, our technology departments, but we start to see that, by nature of us being human beings, there is a fragility in that workforce. We have to be able to continue to grow our capacity to support our industry significantly, but we can't grow this at the same rate the demand grows. So the question becomes, where can we deploy robotics and automation to support this growth in a cost-effective way? And I would argue that we need to move away from, a simple, what I call the macro approach, right? So you write, nothing much more advanced than macros that you ran in Excel, and it's basically just repeating a task over and over, and everything has to be consistently the same for it to be successful, right? And not to call out some of the RPA vendors, but really we have to think in terms that processes change, and we should be learning. We need to start injecting the concept of continuous learning and actually trying to adapt to changing circumstances, but being able to automate as we do that. The challenge with that, though, is we have to shift the way we build our workforce from a workforce that does to a workforce that starts to build platforms to do, right? So in the IT world, it's less around an actual developer or an infrastructure engineer to someone that's more of a platform engineer and how they build out these capabilities for automation. And when I think about my industry, a good example is pre-authorizations, which can cause a lot of friction in the healthcare system. But this is an area that we've proven that using bots, you're able to automate this process and actually get more consistency and better results while driving member satisfaction high, right? And then the last thing that I would call out is I'd be remiss in 2020, look at 2021, if we could go to the next slide, if we didn't talk about workforce development and just the social impact that goes with this. I think it's interesting that we all as leaders continue to feel challenged in hiring qualified talent, but there's a talent pool out there that feels like they want to be part of the workforce. And so how do we really start to transform and build a modern workforce while being representative of the communities we serve in? My argument here is that we need to significantly shift left. We need to fix our pipeline, right? In our community in Minnesota, we rank amongst the last when it comes to STEM and technology, computer science education within our high school systems, right? We have to rethink the way we think about early education. We need to completely rethink our sourcing platforms. What happens to people that are not on LinkedIn if we use LinkedIn to source? How do we rethink all of these approaches so that we're actually able to start to create our workforce for the future? And the value we get out of this is really we start to improve our ability for our community to actually compete globally. We have to think about the fact that our little Minneapolis-St. Paul area, we have to compete on a global landscape, right? And I don't want to be in a position where, all of my resources I'm bringing to bear in this community is from outside the community, right? So these are the things that I'm looking at as will continue to be a challenge in 2021 or will be more a challenge. Looking forward to our panel discussions.
Thank you, Dan, so much. I totally agree with you with all this workforce challenges, and the ideas that you had are great. I thought it was very unusual too about using bots for the pre-authorization, which is a challenge for so many people. So really appreciated your ideas. Thank you so much. And now for our next speaker, I'd like to introduce Tony Peleska. Tony is the Vice President of Information Technology and the Head of Digital Transformation at Kraus-Anderson, where he provides a unique blend of financial acumen, global IT vision, and partnerships, as well as cutting-edge software development solutions. Tony has more than 21 years of business-oriented technology experience in the legal, banking, construction, and finance service industries. He's active on several different boards, councils, and leadership organizations. And Tony's fun fact is Tony and his wife have 2 children who have been the best host parents to 6 different exchange students, 2 from Colombia, 1 from France, Spain, Japan, and Cambodia. So he is really leading an international life. Let's welcome Tony.
Thanks, Dee. Thanks for that introduction, and thanks for having me on the panel today. I would be remiss if I didn't say that having a wife who speaks 4 languages, Spanish, English, French, German, and 2 African tribal languages makes that whole hosting students very easy in our household. She makes it very comfortable for them. So that's been great. But as following up from everybody who's already talked, there's a lot of similarities in the things that I'm going to talk about for opportunities and challenges and priorities really in what I see ahead in 2021. I want to start by talking a little bit about Kraus-Anderson and giving you guys some context of who Kraus-Anderson is and the family of companies that we have to support. I think that as you drive down the interstate at times and you see these big cranes and you'll see a big Kraus-Anderson sign, or you drive by a school and you'll see these big Kraus-Anderson trailers sitting there. That's part of who we are, but really we have a family of companies, and I want to talk a little bit about that. One, our big behemoth is our construction company, and where we have a variety of different businesses, 7 different business units across the Midwest, and we actually provide construction general contractor work across the whole United States. And so there's a big arm of how we financially bring money in. But we also have a realty and leasing company. And that's a big part of our business, is having realty and having properties, where we also do development. We also have a financial services arm, and we also have an insurance arm. So we have all of these different business units as we kind of proliferate how we support technology across the board. Plus, we have what we call the yard. And the best I could, what I could tell you that is that's basically a big Home Depot where we support all of our services that we have out there. So we don't have to be running out to different places. We have these big yards at different places within Minnesota and South Dakota and Wisconsin, where we supply these large scale cranes and different things to our construction sites. And so that's really giving you some context for who Kraus-Anderson is when I talk a little bit about kind of what our role in IT is and kind of how we are looking at 2021 and some of the things that we've seen over the life cycle of what we've done. I want to start by talking about pandemic lessons learned. This last year has been really hard on us. And when you think about it, it's that when we have a problem, we have to shut down all of our operations at every one of our sites if we have any cases of COVID. So planning that and the project management of each one of our sites is really critical for how we have to transform and how we have to interact. And our goal is really to keep projects on task and on schedule. Our goal is to not be ahead of schedule or behind schedule, because when you think about it, you really want to, as you're planning, you really have things that you're having dumped onto the site that you can use and that you want to get implemented at that right time. You don't want to have a proliferation of things on site as you're getting your whole project done. So it's been really difficult for us, which really forced us down our digital transformation. And that's a really big term that I'd like to talk about, is what I'm calling forced digital transformation. And it's really, how do we really look at supply chain? How do we really look at what we create to give things into the hands of owners and really create a safe work environment? Safety is at the foundation of construction, and kind of safety is kind of the kind of precipitous of kind of how we approach all of our work and our project management, and kind of built in and baked into all of our work that we do. And for those of you who also don't know, is that we have historically been at the forefront of virtual reality, AI, RPA, and what if you're not aware of, digital twin technology. And that's creating a model of the sites that we have digitally to present that to our customers and our internal stakeholders, so we can see and view into those worlds of what we have there and kind of model that so we don't have to be there on site. And it's really forced us down a path of taking a look at how we implement that quickly. And in the past, we've done that kind of hunt and peck, and really when a customer would want it, it would be a large scale charge. And it'd be one of those things that we do every now and then, and it would be kind of clunky. And now it's forced us to streamline and kind of drive kind of our building information modeling group into creating structures and a model to create these things and put it into a structural delivery approach for all of our customers, and really force us into creating what I'm calling a customer portal that really provides all those services and components to our constituents and stakeholders and owners day in and day out, so they can track the progress of our work as we move forward with all of our construction sites and all of our and really all of the work that we're building. And they're bringing that into our realty and in our financial arms, so that when we have a site that we already have up, we are actually letting people walk through that as well. One of the other big components are our opportunities is tech enablement in the field. And Teddy talked a little bit about it earlier, and that is driving giving tools into the hands of workers who can use them. If something spins when they see that, it's really not going to, they're going to stop, they're going to throw it off the site, and they're not going to use it. So we really have to make sure that when we spin up these jobs, that we give these people things that they can use and that it really functions for them day in and day out. And we're really, as I talked about earlier, creating that solid model of standardization. It's this 80-20 rule of when we are creating these tools for them to use in the field, that it's 80% of what they really need to use and 20% of what we can build ongoing. One of the things that we're doing there is in virtual reality is partnering with HoloLens, using their HoloLens 2 technology and creating kind of a model so we can actually walk through with a hard hat on and walk through each one of our building sites and see kind of where we're at, kind of take a model pixelation of where we're going and see behind the walls of what we created and where the mechanical and electrical spots are, so that you don't have to break the walls and see things, that you'd have to do in the past. And with all of this, we've really created a proliferation of data. And so for us, it's really making us look at a whole new data strategy and a data model around how we are going to manage this information. So as we embark on these virtual reality pixelated components, we're getting terabytes of data that we're gathering that we're going to have to manage differently than we ever have in the past. So with that, but then we also have some of our challenges that we have that are really hitting our whole market. And one of those is the Architecture Bros Index. And that's where we go to look to see kind of how architects, if they're writing, if they're building, we're going to see construction in the next few months. And the Architecture Bureau Index really dropped over the last 9 months, which really kind of foreshadows that it's really going to be a tough next year for the construction industry as a whole. So we have a lot of work up to this point, but we see that kind of horizon where the next years are going to be tough for us. So the lag in that is what we see. Supply chain problems. It's not only the pandemic, but all the forest fires, the cost of lumber to do some of the work that we do. We have to really source locally and try to find out, we have a whole team of people working to see kind of how do we get, I'd say, resources to our sites, and what are the things we need to do to shift in the marketplace for our supply chain. And that is really also data in the hands of their fingertips to what information do they need to get to new places and see new things. I don't want to even talk anymore about the talent gap. As Dan alluded to earlier in his conversation, I really agree with everything he said. We have to get the right people in the right seats, and we have to start thinking differently about how we are sourcing all of our work. It's working with our partners, how we're hiring, our hiring strategies, what roles we need. And kind of aligned to that is this whole proliferation of tech. in the construction industry and in all the industries of which I have with our family of companies, I think there's just this proliferation of tech. And it's really, how do you kind of hone that into a model in which we can all come together and collaborate around the things that people are seeing? What are the mediums in which we're coming together to talk about the proliferation of tech so that we can implement the right things at the right times with the right resources?
Tony,
And
I think I'm going to have to put a buzz on it because we are on time. Okay.
Oh, sorry about that.
No problem. But I do appreciate all of your ideas. The digital twin is a great idea. You had a lot of thoughts on talent in all different areas. The construction area is different for a lot of people of hearing about this. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And our next speaker is going to be Laura Groshin. Laura is the Vice President and Chief Information Officer for MnTech's largest business group, cardiovascular business. She also leads IT for all global functions at Medtronic. She's responsible for building new capabilities and expertise to drive operational effectiveness, optimize technology expenditures, and support business growth through technology innovation. A University of Minnesota grad, Laura's prior experience includes United Healthcare, Wells Fargo, and KPMG. And Laura's fun fact is she served for a 4-year term in Minnesota government as the chair of the Minnesota Gambling Control Board. So maybe she can give me a few tips that when I go out to Vegas next time. Welcome, Laura.
If I could, Dee, I wouldn't be here. So if you learn them, let me know. But yes, it was a very fun opportunity for 4 years. Good morning, everyone. I am going to, you can advance to the next slide, really talk about something that I think all our speakers talked about today, which is really thinking about, as far as an opportunity, data being an asset, and that it's something we really need to manage as an asset, whether, just like our capital equipment that Tony was just talking about, or whatever your services you provide in your organization, is that really that transformation of how data is just as an important of an asset. But I obviously will talk about it more in the healthcare lens, since that is where Medtronic is. So next slide. Before I get into why data is an opportunity for Medtronic and really the healthcare industry in general, I just want to set the foundation about how we view data and information and its importance. So really, for data to become an asset, we need to transform it into information that either gives you insights into your business. So whether it's, and I think, Tony, you alluded to this, about data, to give you a financial forecast, or such as market share or number of procedures, or even to help give you data and information to make your supply chain plans. And so for us, we look at data really in 3 things: does it drive revenue or our products? Does it decrease expense or the cost of running our business or the cost of our products? Or thirdly, is it really increasing productivity or making us more efficient in what we do? So for us, data really has to fall into one of those lenses. And then I think, people probably aren't aware, but when you think about Medtronic or the medical device industry, is we have had intelligent devices for many, many years. So think about a pacemaker, an ICD. There's data that comes off of those devices, just like your other IoT devices, such as your watch. But I think, given what everybody else talked about, the way our world has transformed this year, we are in the information age, that what we really need to do is continue to enhance the value of that data for not only patients, and all of you as part of the healthcare system, but also our clinicians. And I think, for our medical devices, whether it's in an operating room with our robotics, or as I mentioned, a diabetes pump or a pacemaker, it's not about the lack of data. And I think we've heard that from all the speakers. It's really not about that. It's about being able to evaluate that data and the quality of that data to give insights to, in our case, patients, clinicians, and payers. Next slide. So just to set up this slide a little bit, it's just, really, how do we look at where the value of data would lie, whether it's, device data, which is the top half of this diagram, or whether it's more operational data to run your business. So I won't go through all of these, but this is just a view of how we look at the value data could provide, for example, in the healthcare industry, as well as specifically in medical device. So if I just take the first column, care delivery is really focused on a clinician's or a patient, you and I, management of our care. So for example, since Chris is on the phone, if I'm a clinician at Mayo, there is health information that comes off of my medical device. Again, say it's a pacemaker, that is shared with your provider. And so maybe the next time you come in, he can tweak some of your settings to make sure that device is better managing, the beating of your heart, for example. You look at device support. So, IoT brings us the ability to monitor devices. So if you're looking at, for example, a piece of surgical equipment, identifying servicing needs and proactively scheduling service maintenance appointments and getting that equipment serviced. And so, really when we look at data and the opportunity of data, it's really focused on the value for our constituents, whether that is to, patient management, procedure development, clinical research to help further clinical research. And then obviously for us, it's really about product innovation and product improvement. Next slide. So for us, there's endless possibilities. I think you've heard from all the speakers and all the industries that you've heard from today, that there's a lot of value in harnessing that data. And I think for healthcare, that's really one of our big focus areas. And I think COVID really accentuated that with us going remote and all the things that the other speakers talked about today. And I think, once you get past that operational aspect, really cleaning the data in your own house and using it to manage your business, it's really about partnering across the ecosystem. So in my case, it's in the healthcare system. And, I think one of the things that I think is critical in healthcare is really around data standards. And there are standards. So, for example, standards exist for an EDI, which is a 837 claim submission. But I know from being in the payer space like Dan, that there's great variability in how that is implemented. So a lot of times there are more guidelines than actual standards. And I know probably 10 years ago when I was in financial services, they formed more of a formal consortium to really drive global standards. And I think that's something that we need to do. And there are steps going on. So for example, when I talked about the EDI, the next evolution of that is FHIR. And so there is work going on in the space. I think the other thing we have to talk about when it comes to data is clearly about security and privacy. That is of utmost importance, especially when you look at the nature of the data that we have in the healthcare industry. So we employ practices of need to know and de-identification, aggregation and abstraction of the data, but that has to be paramount in what we do because of the nature of the data. But I think there's more that we can do to not only make data an asset, but partner to really progress data and make the experience for our patients even better. And I truly believe patients are going to demand that interoperability no matter where they are in the healthcare ecosystem. And so I think it's one of those things, being part of the healthcare ecosystem, that I would love to be first to figure that out with my partners rather than, patients really driving that. So that's it. Back to you, Dee.
Thank you so much, Laura. I really appreciated all your value that data provides and the opportunities that you created for it. So thank you so much. We had a fantastic panel today. Thank you, Chris, Casey, Teddy, Sean, Dan, Tony, Laura. What a great panel and great ideas. And now I'm going to switch it back to Jeff.
Thanks, Dee, and thanks to all the panelists, to our sponsors for sharing your insights and perspectives. A lot of great themes around building talent, the importance of data so many things to consider as we break out into some Q&A sessions. So the next part of the event today is we're going to break out into 4 randomly distributed breakout sessions on Zoom, where you'll have a chance to ask questions. It can be just by simply unmuting and asking, raising your hand. I'll try to look for you or your moderator in each of the sessions. But we're going to break out into those 4 groups right now, and your moderator can lead it from there. So thank you so much for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you at future MnTech activities.